Hi ladies and gentlemen, my name is John Kellogg and I teach the Video Games as Literature class here at Grants Pass High School. One of the biggest reasons why I wanted to make this video was because since it's the start of the 24-25 school year, I basically wanted to show where my class began 2 years ago and then point out some of the ways that this Patreon has been able to help me expand my class and grow it to what it is today. And so let's take a look. One of the biggest things that I wanted to show you guys is the library that we've been able to cultivate. I am not extremely rich. I do not make $200,000 a year as a teacher. It takes a long time and a lot of strategic planning in order to get enough video games in order to make it so that this class can run. And so I've been very, let's say diplomatic and very intentful in making sure that there are enough games for this class. One of the ways that I've been doing that is tying the games that are purchased to this class to the same budgets that textbooks are typically bought for in my district. And so I don't just beg for money in order to buy video games, but I let them know that if I'm going to be keeping this class going, I need to have the material and the class content in order to do that. And the nice thing about it is once a digital game is purchased, we never have to replace that. So it doesn't have the same negative impact as, let's say, a textbook that 7 years later you have to rebuy for $200. And so really the only turnaround that you'll need is the consoles. And so these Series S consoles are $300 brand new. We were able to find many that are used for much cheaper. And then the next time they come out with a new Xbox console, the hope is that the library will follow us to that new console and we'll be able to keep it going. And so this class essentially can get nothing but better over time if the exact same money that's put into a regular class is put into this video game class. Now, obviously, there's some other things, for instance, the monitors. You have to make sure that we're paying attention that students don't take pencils and draw over them. You have to make sure with the Xboxes, especially with the mini exposed vents, that you don't have students with mechanical pencils breaking off lead inside them or just pencils at all. And so really the main way that this class is able to run is by making sure that you take care of a lot of those things. And I'll be able to talk more about, classroom structure later. But for right now, let's take a look at the library that we have here. And so as you guys can see, we've got Hades. It's one of the main games that we actually play inside of the Video Games as Literature class. You get to talk about failure. You get to talk about grit. You get to talk about all of these different game mechanics wrapped inside of a really easy to teach kind of content with Greek mythology. And so it's a wonderful way to get anywhere from freshmen to seniors involved inside of the content as they're enjoying a really fun game. And so I've always had Hades as one of my favorites. Portal 2, I've always had the students play co-op 2-player, basically having them work through puzzles together. And then it's a really great way to get into writing because then they're able to talk about how were they able to problem solve. Was one of them the leader or were they working together? It's just kind of a great way essentially in order to reflect on student agency and what are they doing inside of the games themselves. And so I really enjoy that one, just for at least a day or two, a week tops. The Stanley Parable is one of my favorite games to play with students, mainly just because it's so crazy and wacky and a lot of the times they just don't have the opportunity to play it. This is a game that we did not purchase as a school. I actually wrote a letter and sent it to the developer Crows, and they sent us a class set. And so this is what I'm talking about, where if you identify a game that you think for your class is that important, be willing to send the developers an email, a letter, basically telling them what your intentions are, because I've had multiple developers that have reached out to me and been able to help because of that. And so thank you so much, Crows. Literally, my class would not be able to run without you. Some of the other games we have on here, Townscaper. This is a simple mini game. I actually used this in the very first week of my teaching in order to show students, how to use the controls, how to go around an Xbox controller, because you'd be surprised how many students have never actually played on an Xbox or on video games at all. Especially as people that sometimes play video games all the time, we sometimes can get to the point where we just assume everyone knows what we know, and it's really important to make sure that we have some simple games that can help teach those basics. The Walking Dead is one that I use to teach morality and then also choice and dynamic and static narratives in video games. So where the player actually has the ability to change the direction of the story versus a game that is always the same every single time you play it, very similar to a book or a film. And so The Walking Dead is one of those great games where we can show how games can truly drastically change the narrative depending on our choices. And oh my gosh, I love the first season so much. Castle Crashers is one where instead of buying an entire class set, I only bought, I believe, 8 copies for every one of the corner stations. And then because it's a 4-player game, this is a really great one to talk about satire. How can we take the classic heroic knight saves the princess story and then satirize the crap out of it so we end up with a game that is hilarious and awesome like Castle Crashers. Minecraft was sort of a go-to. I had that as one of the first 3 game purchases that we made in this class in order to make sure that I had a game that everyone could easily play, again, to teach controls and things like that. And then of course, Fall Guys. This is one of my favorite games, and not because it's the best game in the world, but this is a great game to identify when kids should not be inside of your video games as literature class. And so especially with Fall Guys, I love it and use it in the first week, because if a student gets extremely stressed and angry and wants to throw a controller with Fall Guys, then I know not to let them play the game Hades. And so there's definitely some inside here that helps me with students. I'm gonna go to the overall games and apps now, and let's take a look at all of our own games. Every single one of these games we have a class set of. And so if you see a game in this library, it's literally one that we've been able to get either via donations from developers, which isn't many, but I think we've got at least 10 games overall. And then the rest are class sets that we've been able to buy through grants that I've won throughout the 2 years that we've had this class, and then to amazing supporters like you from Patreon. And so I'm gonna do my best to point out a few of those real quick, but we have Alan Wake Remastered. We got that from a grant and one of my favorite games of all time. We have almost the entire Batman Arkham series, which is a wonderful game, and it's really kind of one that a lot of current fighting games, at least action fighting games, kind of go off that Rockstar formula. And so I love showing that game for sure. Battlefield 1 is one that we actually got a grant for, but I'm trying to develop a history unit for it, basically to show students what is this reality of war if we play in Battlefield on the hardest difficulty, and what is it like, especially in that opening level where you die and then you inhabit the body of a new soldier. How does that really show you how war affects people? And so there's some really good stuff inside of Battlefield 1 I'm just gonna spend some time on. Call of the Sea, Dandara, and then a few other mini games were actually given to us by Raw Fury, a really awesome indie company that was able to give us a few smaller games, and your help is invaluable, so thank you so much for that. Dark Souls Remastered, I think, was a game that we just got on this console specifically for a senior that wanted to play it for their final project, and so there are a few games that are here or there just because a kid had to have it for that last one. Skyrim is a class set that we were able to purchase thanks, honestly, to your guys' support from Patreon. And so that was about 1.5 years after having this Patreon, we were able to go around and get Skyrim for every single person. And I've developed an actual unit about that. And so if you guys want to go and check that out, that's on my Patreon right now. $5, you guys can go and get that booklet and journal with your students, which would be great. All right, so a few other games on here. We've got Fallout 4. You gotta have Fortnite. I mean, it's a free-to-play game, and honestly, a lot of the times the students just love having it there. If they have a study hall, they can come in and play. We added in some Lego games, an entire unit where students get to basically choose the Lego game they want to play in order to be able to talk about that. We've got Red Dead Redemption 2. That was a grant game. I'm still asking Rockstar to this day, like I'm tweeting them up, begging for them to add in a save function in the first chapter of Red Dead 2, because it's an amazing game, but we have such a hard time in my class getting through the tutorial because some of the missions are over an hour long and we only have hour-long class periods. And so holy moly, it's a great game, but please Rockstar, add that in. Let's see, the Stanley Parable we've already talked about. Spider Heck is an amazing game. I believe only made by 1 or 2 developers, and they send us codes for that for the entire class. And so some of these mini games, again, very important to make sure that you're adding those in there in your class yourself if you want to start this. But so much of this, again, just could not have happened without your support on Patreon. And so I want to show a few of the other smaller things outside of the libraries that you guys have been able to get for our class. Let's take a look at that. All right, so this is one of the really cool things we were able to get with our Patreon funds. We have a Logitech racing wheel for Xbox, and then we also have a manual shifter and the pedals underneath. And so I put this entire thing on the mounted rack, but then I added wheels to the bottom. And at first, I thought it was super counterintuitive because I was like, wait, it's on wheels, it feels less finicky. But the nice thing is, literally, it fits the exact size of my seats, which means they can push it into their seat, lock the wheels, and then push in their chair, and any student in my entire classroom can use this for racing games. And so I'm hoping to get at least 2 or 3 more using Patreon funds eventually, but this is something that you guys have directly been able to help with, which is really awesome for my class. My walls can seem very cluttered at first, and so when you look at both of these TVs, we have an upper TV that's connected to the switch right here, and then we have a lower TV that currently has the PS5 and the bottom switch connected. And so all of this together is a really nice thing to have, mainly because if I look back here, I can turn on any one of these consoles, and using the switcher that I put in here, I can go between the PS5 and the Nintendo Switch, and I also have other inputs that I can use here. And so one of my favorite things that I've been able to do is I can have students using the top and lower TVs in order to play Mario Kart at the exact same time. And so hypothetically, since I have this on this side and the other side, we're talking about up to 16 to 20 students playing Mario Kart at the exact same time, which is a really awesome thing. And so Patreon was able to help me not with the consoles, but with all of the cords in the back here in order to make sure that this all worked at its very best capabilities. It's gonna be a really awesome year here inside of this classroom. And so I just wanted to say thank you guys again so much for your help and support. Every single month, I'm gonna be posting a new material that I've made specifically for video games as literature on my Patreon. And so if you're interested in helping my class, please do your best to become a member and ask for help if you need it. With your help, I'm hoping in the future we can have an entire West Coast, United States full with video games as literature classrooms so that students don't have to be suffering in English class if reading a book isn't their thing. Thank you.